Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Washington.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to urge my colleagues not to override the President's veto of this special interest piece of legislation. And I want to thank my colleague from California for her leadership on this issue and for her constant involvement in making sure that national environmental and safety standards are adhered to. She's been a great advocate throughout this process, and very much appreciate her voice in this debate as we close, hopefully, the debate about the Keystone Pipeline legislation. This bill to approve the Keystone Pipeline undermines a well-established process for determining what is in the national interest, and if we overrode the President's veto, we would be subverting safety and environmental standards that are important to the American people. I'm glad the President vetoed this legislation, and I urge my colleagues not to override the decision. And I think the President's veto message said it best, quote, "Through this bill, the United States Congress attempts to circumvent a proven process for determining whether or not building and operating a cross-border pipeline serves the national interest. And because of this act of Congress, it conflicts with executive branch procedures and cuts short considerations of issues that could bear on our national interests, including security and safety and the environment, and therefore it has earned my veto," end quote. So the President sums it up pretty much, I think. Why circumvent the process? You know, the people who've been advocates for the pipeline have been circumventing the process all the way through. They circumvented the process by not going through the utility commission in their state, the Public Utility Commission, and instead wrote legislation around that. That legislation has been challenged in court, and the rest of it has been an enormous process here in Washington, D.C., while the company was negotiating with the State Department, was also supporting efforts to circumvent that process at the State Department and just get a rubber stamp on their permit saying project approved. Well, I think this project, like every other project in the United States of America, should follow the rules. While we spent the better part of January considering this legislation, there are other things that transpired. We heard a lot about the routing and that it was a settled matter. Well, in January, or since January, it's worth noting that Nebraska landowners have taken a new step to defend their rights as private property owners. And on January 9th, 2015, the Nebraska Supreme Court upheld a special carve-out of TransCanada to site the XL Keystone Pipeline. They did this even though 4 judges who addressed the question said that this carve-out was unconstitutional. After this setback, several landowners whose property would be seized along the proposed route filed a new suit and hopefully stopped the seizure of their land. And last month, just this past February, 2 Nebraska district courts have issued temporary injunctions enjoining TransCanada's effort to acquire right-of-way for Keystone Pipeline by eminent domain. So as the moment is here in the vote, the pipeline's route through Nebraska is still in doubt because the new lawsuit challenges the governor's ability to approve it. It is also worth noting that South Dakota will hold a new hearing on the proposed route of the pipeline through their state in May. At this time, we simply don't know whether South Dakota will make the same decision it did when it had first approved the route 3 years ago. The situation in Nebraska and South Dakota make it clear that even if this bill would to become law, the Keystone Pipeline will not get built anytime soon. So I know that my colleagues would like to rush the process, and they'll talk all about the various steps in the process where this project got delayed. But who said building a pipeline through the United States of America by a foreign interest should get expedited approval stamped on it from the very beginning? That's what they have done. They have circumvented what is a process in the state, which should have been through the Utilities Commission, and they've tried to circumvent a process here in the United States Senate. So I hope that we will we will not override the President's veto, but give the President of the United States the ability to still consider these national interests of the environment and security. We had a pretty robust debate here on the Senate floor, and many of the issues that would have been important, my colleagues voted to say we shouldn't consider those environmental issues. So I get on the other side of the aisle, there are people that want to give a pass-go speedy permit to this process, and I urge my colleagues not to override the president, but allow him to do the homework that is needed on security, on environment, and on making sure that a due process is followed here. So I ask my colleagues to not override the president's veto. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the floor.